Alabama's odds move from plus 100 to minus 185 to make the college football playoff today, and the public seems to think that it's a done deal. Okay, Alabama's in. You can check that box. It's over. They're in. It's a done deal. South Carolina's out. No, it's not. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go out and say it right now. If Clemson beats SMU on Saturday, South Carolina's making the college football playoff. You can book it here. I stand by that. That's what I believe. So I'm going to tell you a lot of reasons why here. First off, I speak from experience here. Last year, when Florida State beat Louisville, Florida State's chances to make the CFP moved from plus 100 to minus 190. That Saturday night and that Sunday morning. That Friday night to that Sunday. I thought, oh man, being the naive individual that I was, oh man, Florida State's odds are really moving here. The books must know something. They must be on to something. Alabama moved to like plus 150 at that point. I think they were like minus 120 and ended up moving. And myself, and a lot of the public, by the way, got extremely paranoid and thought, oh yeah, the books know something, and put a lot of money on Florida State. Obviously, Alabama made the college football playoff, and, well, the books made a lot of money. This is not a done deal. This is not a done deal. These odds makers, they know what they're doing, especially when it comes to these subjective outcomes like this. Now, this odds moving is not a part of the odds makers knowing something that we don't, at least for the most part. It's due to how the market is reacting. So a lot of people are putting money on Alabama, so therefore they're getting cheap. They're getting more expensive to buy. That's exactly what that means. But you know what? I'm going to tell y'all something. The committee has already set the precedent for how they're going to rank teams, and nobody really knows it, but you just have to see it. November 12th, I'm going to take y'all back here a few weeks ago. After LSU got crushed by Alabama at home, South Carolina, in the rankings that came out, was actually ranked ahead of them, the college football playoff rankings. Now, Harris, why is that significant? Well, LSU and South Carolina had the same record. LSU had the head-to-head. And you're probably thinking, well, LSU was probably ranked behind South Carolina because of the bad calls and because of the officiating. Ward Manuel, the chairman, the director of the College Football Playoff Committee, listen to this explanation. He lays it out as to why he ranks South Carolina ahead of them. Carolina was 21st, LSU was 22nd. Quote, yeah, it really came down to how the committee felt since that game. South Carolina and LSU have gone in completely different directions. South Carolina has had some wins in that time frame, and LSU has 2 consecutive losses. So we do look at head-to-head. We obviously consider that closely. We look at that in evaluation and take a good hard look when teams play head-to-head and the outcome of the game. But in this particular case, we looked at the body of work and where those teams are. And so the discussion amongst the committee really came down to factoring in everything. In particular, where those teams were since that last game was played. And obviously, LSU struggled the last 2 weeks, and South Carolina has really performed admirably since that loss to LSU. I want to tell y'all something. The last 6 weeks, it's probably going to come down highly likely to Alabama and South Carolina for that final spot, depending on a lot of other stuff, but probably those two. Alabama, these last 6 weeks, is 4-2. They have 0 top 25 wins. They have 1 loss against a 6-6 Oklahoma team by 3 possessions. South Carolina, these last 6 weeks, is 6-0. They have 3 top 25 wins. They beat Oklahoma 35-9, who crushed Alabama, by the way. They beat Vandy 28-7, who beat Alabama. Top 25 wins in total. Carolina's got 3. Bama's got 3. I do want to bring this up, though. When Bama beat Missouri, Brady Cook didn't play. Drew Pine was the backup. He came in and threw 3 picks. And so you could say it's even, but there is some subjectivity there. And sub-top 25 losses, South Carolina's got 0. 0 losses outside the CFP top 25. Bama's got 2, that being Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. Also a big factor here that the committee's going to look at. Okay, both teams are going to be playing on the road, right? South Carolina's 5-1 on the road. Alabama's 2-3. They have a losing record on the road. And this is a quote. Everybody should know this. This should be more publicized. Everyone should know about this. Bill Hancock, the College Football Playoff Committee director last year. Here's this quote that he said when deciding between Alabama and Florida State. Quote, most deserving is not anything in the committee's lexicon. They are to rank the best teams in order. And that's what they do. Just keep that word in mind. Best teams. Really revealing. Easily you could have argued Florida State was more deserving than Alabama last year. They should have gotten in. And you know what? I would probably agree with that. 100%. But you know what? Against North Alabama last year and against Louisville last year, the committee decided Florida State hasn't looked as good as Alabama has down the stretch. So we're going to put Alabama in. Despite Florida State probably being more deserving, Alabama has looked better recently. And guess what? They chose Alabama. Look, the College Football Playoff Committee gets very subjective. Is that fair? That's a conversation for another day. But you know what? They've set the precedent. You just have to see it. You just have to see it. I'm going to give you another example. 2022. Tennessee beat Alabama 52-49 that year, if you remember the field goal post coming down to the Tennessee River. They then lost to South Carolina. Despite Tennessee beating Alabama head-to-head that year, they put Bama at 5, and they both had the same record, by the way, and Tennessee at 6. Both of these teams had the same, again, exact record, and Tennessee had the head-to-head win against Bama. You could say committee put Bama over Tennessee because Hendon Hooker got hurt. And I would say, yeah, that's a possibility. But Tennessee throttled Vandy 59-0 the week after. They told the committee, we're fine. Our backup is great here. And guess what? Bama was still ahead. Why? Well, Tennessee had a bad loss. They had a really bad loss to South Carolina. And Bama didn't. Both the teams they lost to were in the top 10 that year in the college football playoff rankings. So in other words, let me get into this. The committee used subjectivity because they thought Bama was better. They negated the head-to-head because they thought that Bama's body of work was better. And mind I tell you, like the South Carolina-Bama game, Tennessee didn't roll or crush Alabama that year. They barely squeaked by and barely beat them. So this Alabama-South Carolina game from a couple months ago, let's dissect this. Alabama 27, South Carolina 25. South Carolina, in Bryant-Denny, by the way, had more first downs, more total yards, more passing yards, and more rushing yards that day. The difference, they had 4 turnovers, and Alabama had 2. Well, you could very well argue that South Carolina was the better team that day, possession by possession on the road. And you could say, well, Bama should be in because they won. And you know what? I would say that is completely and utterly fair. That is a fair argument to make, but let's go back to this quote. Hancock said, not more deserving teams, better teams. He basically implied to get the term more deserving out of your vocabulary. And let me ask you this question. Is Alabama the better team than South Carolina right now? Are they genuinely? If you think so, have they looked good enough down the stretch to prove it? They lost 24-3 to Oklahoma just 8 days ago. Just saying. And how South Carolina lost that LSU game, this is another argument as well, because there's more subjectivity that could get thrown into this. South Carolina could easily be 10-2 right now. Easily. You can't make that argument for Alabama. If the College Football Playoff Committee says, okay, you know what? South Carolina got hosed. That third loss has an asterisk by it, which, by the way, they can. They can. Is Bama's 2-point win over South Carolina at home, in which they got outgained in every single facet against them, enough to justify them being ranked ahead of South Carolina, who arguably could have 2 losses and probably should have 2 losses? Is it? Because that's where all of a sudden it gets way more subjective. So with all this in mind, folks, South Carolina's at plus 500 right now to make the college football playoff. Just know that. I want y'all to know that. I absolutely love that value. That is a fantastic value. And that's something that if I didn't bet, by the way, if you tailed this, a month ago after A&M lost to South Carolina, Carolina was 4-3, I said beware of the 9-3 SEC teams and laid $20 plus $10,000 on South Carolina to make the college football playoff. I win $2,000 if that happens. Told people to tail and to follow with me that it's worth a sprinkle. That's the only reason I'm not going to bet that South Carolina at plus 500 right now. But if you're a smart bettor and you know how things are going, you know how certain trends work, I would hammer that. I would hammer South Carolina plus 500 to make the college football playoff right now because the committee has already set the precedent. You just have to see it.